HBS South Asia Research Center based in Mumbai was established in 2006 to enable HBS faculty to study trends and emerging business models in the region. We now have a significant body of case studies and research projects on South Asia. Over the last 12 years, our mission has been to conduct research, foster dialogue, and build community. As a part of this, the center curates an ongoing series of discussions and roundtables on topics that are relevant to the South Asia development story. I'm delighted to be launching the Hbs Impact Series in partnership with Dasra. This series has been curated at the behest of alumni who have reached out periodically asking for ways in which they can volunteer and give back to the country. The focus is to convene conversations with leading change makers in different sectors. The objective is to share their work, the intention, impact, journey, opportunities, and challenges. We hope these intimate circles of sharing and stories will both educate, inspire, and contribute to social change in India.
So Dasra is really excited to be collaborating with you. As an HBS alumni, I can't imagine, I never imagined in 2002 that we would be standing here together and launching such a series. We think it's so important to have these kinds of conversations, and I wanted to thank Anjali and Anshul, if you're out there, for making this happen. And please come to these. Our first one is March 25th, right?
Yes. With Ronnie and Zarina Screwvala.
Yes, great, thank you. All right. Okay. So I have a couple of things common with this, besides being really cute. Who is he? Anyone? Cookie Monster. C for cookie. We're really excited that we've been able to partner with Sesame Street to really begin to help them build a roadmap for growing their impact in India. And we have a real opportunity today where Sherrie's come all the way to share the Sesame Street story. We're even more excited that they are on a platform for which there have been and is a big bet. They won the $100 million from MacArthur and then got a matching grant from Lego, and I think are really leading the way forward on how you collaborate, but also how you scale. And so I'll hand it over to Sherrie.
So I am thrilled to be here today to talk about the power of audacious philanthropy, and I really want to thank Dasra for giving us the perfect forum to do so. So I'm going to start by taking you back about 50 years to the late 1960s in the United States. Now, this was a time of war, a time of race riots, of growing poverty, and President Lyndon Johnson declared his famous war on poverty. There had also been a vast sort of new wave of research showing how behind children in poverty were in terms of early education and the expense of creating traditional preschools. So in this backdrop, a young public television producer named Joan Gance Cooney and a young educational psychologist named Lloyd Morissette had the simple but bold idea to see if television could be used to teach, and more, to reach less advantaged children and give them some of the same opportunities as more privileged children by arriving at school ready to learn. So keep in mind, this is when television was new. It was considered a vast wasteland, and educational television, there was no such thing. And yet, Joan and Lloyd felt if children could learn from beer commercials and jingles on television, could they learn letters and numbers? And they took this bold idea to the Ford Foundation and the Carnegie Corporation, and they together, along with the Department of Education, invested $8 million in this big bet. Now keep in mind, $8 million in 1967 was the equivalent of about $60 million today. So with the support in hand, they created what we all now know is Sesame Street. Okay, Sesame Street started out, as you can see, it was a multiracial cast, the first in the United States, because they wanted children from all walks of life to be able to see themselves on TV. They brought in a talented group of producers, writers, Harvard educators, I might add, and they also very deliberately set out to engage adults as well as children. So that's why Joan recruited Jim Henson, the famous Muppeteer, along with his iconic Muppets, and humor, celebrities, musicians, and parodies, because they believed that if they engaged adults as well as children, and parents were watching with a child, that the learning would be deeper and go off screen. And you know, I'm constantly amazed at the prescience of Joan and Lloyd, because not only were they the first to focus on preschool, and we now have the science to prove that those first 5 years of life are the most important in a child's brain development, but they also knew to reach out to adults and engage adults as well. And we also know today, through the neuroscience, that if a child has experienced traumatic events, something called toxic stress, that it literally inhibits their ability to learn and their healthy brain development. And what is the most important thing to help mitigate that? It's engagement with a caring adult. So this is one of the reasons that Sesame Street, to even today, is so powerful in helping particularly vulnerable children. So I'm also thrilled to say that it was an instant success. I think 1.6 million children watched Sesame Street in the very first week, and that was more than the number of children in preschool at the time. It also worked. You know, there have been more than 1,000 studies on the efficacy of Sesame Street, and perhaps one of the most famous was a longitudinal study that showed that children in the US who grew up watching Sesame Street tested 16% higher in their grade point average, even throughout high school. So, another surprise, in spite of this bold idea, even Joan Gance Cooney had no idea that there would be a global appeal. She always said she thought she was creating the quintessential American show, but within a year, Brazil, then Germany, then Mexico, all came saying they wanted their own versions. And that's what led to our local adaptations around the world, including places like here in India. We now reach over 150 million children around the world in over 150 countries. And we constantly invest in the research to make sure we're having an impact. A recent meta-analysis that the University of Wisconsin conducted, which tested 15 different countries and outcomes, showed that watching local versions of Sesame Street created learning outcomes that were equivalent to that of traditional preschool, but at scale and a fraction of the cost. So today, we're constantly looking at where can we make a difference. You know, we've had a long history of tackling some really difficult issues, always from a child's perspective, whether that was HIV and AIDS in South Africa, gender equity around the world in places where girls are disproportionately left behind, autism in the United States. When we see issues that we know are going to be challenges that are keeping children from reaching their highest potential, we try to figure out where can Sesame help. And that's what led us in recent years to figure out what could we do for refugees. As you all know, it's the largest number of displaced children and families. It's 68.5 million people today, and almost half of those are children. So we knew we needed to step up. It's also really amazing that in all humanitarian aid, less than 3% goes to education, and only a tiny fraction of that goes to early education. But we knew we couldn't do it alone, and that's what led to our partnership with the International Rescue Committee. You know, we have proven educational content, but we're not the direct service provider. So we often work with those direct service providers on the ground where we know the power of partnership can really make a difference. We needed an organization that knew as much about the needs of refugees as we knew about the needs of young children. And so we began a pilot in Jordan, taking all Arabic content and working with the IRC staff on the ground to reach children through home visitation, through learning centers in Lebanon, Syria, Jordan, and Iraq. Now, it's been mentioned, the MacArthur's 100 and change, and I'm thrilled that I just met Deepa Chowdhury from MacArthur, who's here today. And I have to say, I think this is one of the best examples of audacious philanthropy, because they had the humility to decide as a board we think we know what we should invest in, but why don't we throw it out there and let anyone apply that's addressing a specific issue of our time? At that time, we decided we had to apply, and we felt like the refugee crisis was one of the most pressing issues of our time, and so we applied for the MacArthur competition along with our partners from the IRC. And I don't think we ever thought that 19 months later, and 1,904 applicants later, but who's counting, that we would be the last one standing. And because of that audacious philanthropy of investing $100 million, we are embarking on creating the largest early childhood intervention in the history of humanitarian response. So just to give you a little sense of what that means, we will be creating all new Sesame Arabic production, and you can imagine the power not only of teaching children, but of modeling respect and understanding. So there'll be new Muppets, a Muppet who had to leave their home, who becomes best friends with a Muppet there, and all of the traditional Sesame social and emotional skills that we can teach so well. We will also, as I mentioned, work really closely with the IRC, so you have mass media to reach children in all of these countries, as well as those in their new neighbors in Jordan, Iraq, Lebanon. It's so important to be reaching the host community as well as those displaced children. But then working with our partners, we'll be able to reach the most vulnerable children with direct services. And as I mentioned before, this is where Sesame's appeal to adults is a huge asset, because we're creating content that is not only a tool for the child, but is a catalyst for that adult to engage with that child. Now, most of all in this project, we wanted to create a model that could be replicated, not just in the Middle East, but wherever there are refugee children. And we believe MacArthur chose us in large part because of the potential to transform humanitarian response, to be a catalyst for others to step up, and to call attention to the incredible need in terms of reaching the youngest children in refugee settings and of the potential. And I am thrilled to say that in less than a year, the Lego Foundation came to us and said that they wanted to invest another $100 million, I know, for us to deepen our work with learning through play in Jordan and Lebanon, but also to expand to reach the Rohingya population in Bangladesh. And I have to say that no matter what, I mean, this is such challenging work, but it makes me believe we have already begun to be that catalyst to truly transform humanitarian response. And there again, it was that audacious philanthropy that, just like helped create Sesame Street 50 years ago, is helping us to change the world for refugee children. So we know the power of media and Muppets. We've seen it firsthand for over 50 years. But I want to give you an example. In Afghanistan, a country where there are only 5 million children under the age of 5, we're reaching 4 million of those children through radio and television. And this is a country where one of our key goals is gender equity and girls' education, because girls are so disproportionately left behind. So if you look at this photo, you'll see the Muppet up in the right corner. Her name is Sherrie. And we deliberately made sure that our first local Muppet was a little girl, that she wore her school uniform proudly. She loves to go to school. She loves sports. She has a little brother named Xerox who looks up to her. And in everything we do, we are modeling strong young girl with tons of possibilities, but also who's an equal with boys. And, you know, as I thought it was so great on the last panel when Madhu's talked about we need men and boys, it's not that Sherrie is only inspiring young girls to dream big, but she's showing young boys that it's okay for girls to go to school and have different roles and responsibility. And best of all, we always do our research, children who watch Bache Simpson, and it's the #1 favorite show, and Sherrie is the #1 favorite character of boys and girls, they test, little boys who watch test 29% higher on attitudes of gender equity, saying they think it's fine for girls to go to school and have different roles and responsibility. Wait, it gets better. We've also done qualitative research that shows that fathers who watch Bache Simpson, and keep in mind in these countries, 70% of the audience is watching with a parent or a caregiver, fathers who watch Bache Simpson have said again and again that that's the reason they've changed their minds about permitting their daughters to go to school. Thank you. And I think that's the power of Media Muppets, to literally change attitudes and open hearts and minds. So we also have Chomky, this powerful little girl Muppet right here in India. Like Zari, she wears her school uniform proudly. Her best friend is a little boy named Elmo. They are equals. They work to solve problems together. And through other programming called Chomky's World, we make a point of modeling different roles for boys and girls. Boys who love to cook, girls who want to be astronauts, boys who can cry. And I think it's so important because we're reaching children in those critical early years when they're forming their own sense of self and sense of possibilities. So I'd like to show a quick video just to give you a sense of these powerful girl role models around the world and the impact they can have.
It's an idea that's always been at the heart of Sesame Street. Give every child, everywhere, an equal chance in life.
We see our job in India as Sesame to really shift the paradigm around what we mean by high quality early childhood education in this country, because there is an imperative need, and particularly for girls.
To promote the education and empowerment of girls, we're using our TV programs, mobile content, even shortwave radio, to get to children any way we can at such a critical time.
This is the time we can make a difference. Between the ages of 3 and 7, you seem to make an imprint in their lives. And then that imprint is what they build their foundation on.
And what about you, Kamkhen? What do you want to be when you grow up?
Me? That's easy. I want to be a scientist.
Our engaging, confident characters are excellent role models, giving Sesame a unique opportunity to influence and shift attitudes.
The children, they believe that Tuk Tuk is their friend and they can trust her.
हाँ, तो जब मैं जाऊंगी एस्ट्रोनॉट बनके और अलग-अलग planets पे तो मेरे साथ चलोगी?
Our aim is for girls to see themselves differently. As students, professionals, or even soccer players. To change girls' prospects and open minds, we're modeling life possibilities that help young boys and men view girls as worthy, smart, and equal.
मतलब जो मैंने रेडियो पे सुनी कि आगे मत बोलिए, मेरी लड़की आगे तक पढ़े, इसलिए मत बोलिए। चमकी की बात मुझे ये बढ़िया, सबसे बढ़िया बेहतरीन ये लगी कि आगे तक मेरे बच्चे पढ़े, तो ये सबका भला होगा तो लड़की को भला होगा।
It's one thing for them to know they can be anything, but it's another thing to give them what they need to get there.
At Sesame Street, we know early education can unlock a child's future potential, change lives, and make the world a better place.
I love you.
I do love that video, but I have to tell you, the father you saw in rural India, when we went to film him, it was just to try to get footage of a place where we knew they listened on radio rather than watching TV. We had no idea he would say that. So it was so incredible. Finally, I just want to say that these Muppet characters have an incredible ability to be powerful ambassadors for early education, be incredible role models. I've traveled around the world with Chomky from India and the incredibly talented Muppeteer Ghazal, who performs Chomky, and she's a rock star, and she's incredible on raising awareness of the importance of investing in girls. I mean, you can see here Michelle Obama with Muppets. Zori is with the First Lady of Afghanistan in the lower, is that left-hand corner, Rula Ghani, Melinda Gates with Raya. and Sherrie, and above is Desmond Tutu, Archbishop Desmond Tutu from South Africa with Oprah. So you can see the power of these characters to garner attention, to raise awareness. And I just have to say, if you think about the importance of this philanthropy, of everything you all do in this room, if it were not for Audacious Philanthropy, 50 years ago with Ford and Carnegie, Sesame Street would not be here. It would not be educating millions of children around the world. They literally changed children's media. And if it were not for MacArthur and Lego, who I believe are absolutely transforming humanitarian response, and I think what we really are asking ourselves, what can Audacious Philanthropy do in India today? With India ranks 108th out of 144 countries in the Global Gender Equity Gap Report. But these Muppets, we have the power to model, to inspire, to change attitudes around girls and boys and gender equity. And if 164 million children are under the age of 6 in India, half of whom do not have access to early education, what is the power of using media to reach those children, to change their lives, especially in the early years? So again, I want to thank Dasra for this opportunity, and I want to say all of us in the room have the ability to be that transformative if we truly think audaciously. Thank you so much.